We have breaking news again out of the Middle East. This seems to be a common recurring theme here. And you may think I'm talking about the Israeli incursion into southern Lebanon. Actually, that's not breaking news. What we're talking about is that the White House is reporting, and the CNN is reporting on it, that they believe Iran attack is imminent. A ballistic missile attack, they say, is potentially going to be launched by Iran into Israel for any number of things. The attack into Lebanon, the assassination of Hania in Tehran a couple of months back. Who knows what the motivation is right now, and whether this is true or not, we don't know. But all I can tell you is that it is a very alarming development because of a lot of the threats and really blasting statements that have come out of a number of Iranian leaders, Israeli leaders against Iran, which we're going to show here subsequent during this episode. But also the fact that there's a lot of U.S. firepower, additional firepower heading to the region, and lots of combustible pieces here. And of course, the primary purpose this show, we're going to look at the Hezbollah and the Israeli war in the southern Lebanon. And that's the part of the backdrop against all kinds of other violence going on in the region. And I'm really grateful today to try and unpack this really messy situation. Is Rajan Menon, who used to be with Defense Priority, currently is the emeritus professor at the City College of New York. Raj, welcome back to the show. It's been a long time.
Hey, Danny, good to see you.
And sorry, we have to bring you back in the middle of a potential, escalation of a war situation. But, you've been tracking on this situation for a long time. This is something you're really, really good at. So we're really grateful to have you on the show to try to help us understand some things today.
Thanks very much.
Listen, one of the things just right off the bat that is worrisome to me is not just this statement that the White House is saying that they're apparently picking up intelligence that Iran is getting ready to fire missiles, but because just hours before that, Secretary of Defense Austin really issued kind of a worrisome comment here. I'm going to put it up on the screen, his comment here, and I'll read it off because the words are kind of small because it's not a verbal statement. Gary, if you could roll that. He said, we agreed on the necessity of dismantling attack infrastructure along the border to ensure that Lebanese Hezbollah cannot conduct October-style attacks on Israel northern communities. A diplomatic resolution is required to ensure that civilians can return safely to their homes on both sides of the border. We discussed the serious consequences for Iran in the event Iran chooses to launch a direct military attack against Israel. And, and so the part of that consequence is the additional firepower that the U.S. has sent there. How seriously, Raj, do you see the situation right now and the risk of escalation?
Danny, I think it's very, very high. The White House's intention might be to stay the hand of Iran, to deter Iran, and also to force Hezbollah to stop its attacks in the north. But at the moment, I think what we've done is to assure Netanyahu that he can go ahead with whatever he wants, which looks like a ground invasion of some magnitude against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and then possibly a strike against Iran. Now, our intention may be deterrence, but as you know, the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And the question is, are we giving Bibi Netanyahu a blank check, and are we going to be swept into a war that, for me, doesn't appear to have any upsides for the United States?
Yeah, I can't see a single reason why this is in America's national interest to potentially risk a war, getting willingly drawn into a war against Iran, because there's been so many direct statements by a number of American officials that if anything happens, we will again defend Israel as we did, and they specify this, as we did last April when Israel came under fire from Iran after Israel had destroyed the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus. And of course, as I think we've talked in the past, that was probably a message by Iran that they did not want to escalate into a war. So they took action that they knew we would be able to shoot down. And then that ended the whole situation, at least as of that moment. But now then it seems like we're ready to go again. And my concern is, and I'm going to show you why I think this, is that Netanyahu may construe this as not just a blank check, but yes, we're willing to basically let you use the American armed forces to try and take out your enemy in Iran. Now we'll see. We'll see if you agree with that or not as we go on through here. But first, I want to look at one thing that Austin said in his statement. There was about an October-style 7th attack that could come from Hezbollah. Let me show you where he got that from. This is Daniel Hagari explaining why Israel is going into southern Lebanon.
The Israel Defense Forces is conducting limited and targeted raids along Israel's northern border against the threat Hezbollah poses to civilians in northern Israel. These localized ground raids will target Hezbollah strongholds that threaten Israeli towns, kibbutzim, and communities along our border. Hezbollah turned Lebanese villages next to Israeli villages into military bases, all ready for an attack on Israel. Hezbollah had prepared to use those villages as staging grounds for an October 7th style invasion into Israeli homes. Hezbollah planned to invade Israel, attack Israeli communities, and massacre innocent men, women, and children. They called this plan Conquer the Galilee.
Okay, listen, I would say you have to take any statement coming out of Israel with a grain of salt, but I think it's more like a chunk of rock salt. So it's hard to take anything at face value. A lot of things have been said that have been proven to be completely inaccurate here. But what do you make of this claim that apparently Israel intercepted intelligence that there was a plan from Hezbollah to launch cross-border raids to kill, basically a terrorist attack, another October 7th, and specifically to kill innocent men, women, and children? Have you heard anything about that? And what do you think of the claim?
So my assessment, Danny, is that Israel has now gone beyond responding with intensive air attacks to Hezbollah strikes against the Israeli north, which has displaced something like, I don't know, about 20, 30,000 Israelis, maybe more. It has now intensified the attack, taken out about 20 of Hezbollah's senior commanders, including, of course, its Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah. And therefore, Hezbollah is on the back foot. And the idea that it is now in a position to stage an October 7th-like attack against Israel strikes me as something hyperbolic. But of course, if you're going to go into Lebanon and escalate the war, you want to make the case that you're forced to do it because of extreme circumstances. Can I just add one thing about Iran, Danny, because you brought it up in your comments? This is unlike in the past. Iran is now under great pressure to do something because along with Nasrallah, it lost one of its major commanders, Abbas Nilfurushan. It suffered the attack against Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, when he was in Tehran, no less. And it is now seeing one of its major, if not the major ally in the region, Hezbollah, get pummeled, and an Israeli war against Hezbollah. The Israelis have also now decided to take stronger action against the Houthis in Yemen, who are strong allies with Iran. So Iran is now under the gun and forced to show that it can retaliate. But my own assessment is that Iran, while it is severe in the rhetoric department, generally has been fairly cautious. Remember, for example, an American drone strike that killed General Soleimani,
Yeah.
the iconic figures in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iran responded with a kind of token salvo of missiles, but really nothing much. Same thing after Haniyeh died. But I think now its back is against the wall, and it has no good options because a confrontation with Israel into which the United States is inadvertently pulled is a no-win situation for Iran. But from our standpoint, going to war against Iran is not like going to war against Iraq as we did in 2003, and we know how that turned out. This is going to be a very major conflagration.
What could Iran do in the event that there was a preemptive strike, to preempt this alleged preparation for an attack. Or even if it came, even if Iran actually did some sort of missile strike, and then whether the U.S. or U.S. and Israel responded, what would Iran do? Because unless you're going to go in on the ground with hundreds of thousands of troops like we did in Iraq, right, you're not going to be able to defeat the Iranian side. You can launch all kinds of missiles, but that will basically turn into an open-ended situation, don't you think?
That's correct. I mean, you can launch missiles at Iran, and a lot of them, but the question is, will you get Iran to succumb? Now, you asked, what can Iran do? It, of course, cannot invade Israel for sheer geographic reasons, but it can fire back a barrage of missiles, hoping that some of them get through, but it can also escalate in other ways. For example, it has the capacity to close the Strait of Hormuz, and that would send shockwaves through the global economy. So, it is very easy to start something like this. The question is, if there's a conflict spiral, are you in a position, are any of the participants in a position to make sure that the spiral goes in the direction that is advantageous to it, or simply spins out of control?
Yeah, and that is going to be, the perpetual aim of everybody who starts using military power, that they want to be able to control it. And like most of the time, I would say in human history, it doesn't quite work out that way. Now, I want to continue on with what Hagari said in that same interview there, because he also said that they were forced into this one as well. And I want you to pay careful attention to what he says on the back end of this, because I think that he's missing something. Watch this.
If the state of Lebanon and the world can't push Hezbollah away from our border, we have no choice but to do it ourselves. I want to make it clear. Our war is with Hezbollah, not with the people of Lebanon. We do not want to harm Lebanese civilians, and we're taking measures to prevent that. We will not let 7th of October happen again on any one of our borders.
So is he right? Did they have no choice? So there was no other option to try and bring even stability. I won't use the word peace, but stability on either side of that border.
First of all, Danny, in a weird sense, the United States and Hezbollah on this one issue have had the same objective. You know that we have supported the negotiations being mediated by Qatar between Hamas and Israel. Hezbollah's position has been, the moment there's a ceasefire, its barrage of missiles, most of which, by the way, haven't gotten through, and none of them have done any serious damage, will stop. So you can't talk about what is going on between Israel and Hezbollah and abstract from that picture the war in Gaza, which is about to reach the 1 mile mark. Now, on Hagari's point that we wish the Lebanese people well and we don't want to harm you, let us remember that already, Danny, 1 million Lebanese have been displaced from their homes. That is about nearly a fifth of the population. Do the math and think what that would be like if we were in the United States. And I mean, a proportion of our population of that magnitude had been displaced. On top of that, already scores have been killed. So if a ground invasion is preceded by a much more intense ground campaign, given the density of population in Lebanon, I find it hard to believe that the Lebanese people can somehow be walled off from the destruction. They have not been in Gaza, and they won't be in Lebanon.
Now, talking specifically about Lebanon and this incursion here. Now, you wrote in the what's the name of that? You wrote
New Statesman.
Yeah, then in the New Statesman here, you wrote about 4 days before all of this stuff, especially with Hassan Nasrallah's assassination. But you were writing several things in there about what you would be worried about if they did this. Well, they obviously have now, but I wonder if you can explain a few of the things here. We'll start with the first thing that's highlighted in here. You said, besides the ground invasion in Lebanon have not worked out well for Israel in the past. The first attempt in 1978 sought to create a buffer zone, which is what they're saying they're doing now, and it didn't work very well. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what happened in 1978.
Sure. There's 1978, there's 1982, and then there is 2006. In none of these instances did Israel achieve its lasting goal of creating a buffer zone And you'll remember that in the war of the 1980s, that is the war from which Hezbollah emerged and fought Israel to the point where the IDF, the Israeli army, had to withdraw. Ditto in 2006. So Israel has to calculate that this time, when it already has a full-blown war on its southern front, right in Gaza, it can also wage a war in its northern front. Now, I've been following the Israeli press, and some senior former IDF officials have said that the IDF is much smaller now than it was 20 years ago, and it cannot simultaneously wage a ground campaign in Gaza and a ground campaign in the north, where it hopes to take territory in southern Lebanon and hold it against a fighting force that has that is Hezbollah, about 40,000 forces altogether, including reservists. Now, there's no question that Hezbollah has taken it on the chin, and we can talk about that later, because what the Israelis did is a very severe setback for Hezbollah. But once you enter their turf, then it could be a very different story.
Right, and towards that end here, let me pull this up on my own screen here. This is another article which I think just came out today, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I see this came out today. You say Israel won't find victory in Lebanon. This invasion is only a route to further entanglement. What's the takeaway here?
So the question is, what is the objective? One objective I can think of is to push Hezbollah, its ground forces, and its missile batteries beyond the Litani River, further north into Lebanon. Well, that goal has been tried before and it hasn't worked. Now, if you're talking about destroying Hezbollah, remember Bibi Netanyahu said, my goal in Gaza is to destroy Hamas. We can come back to this if you'd like and talk about this. Remember, Hezbollah has lost Nasrallah. They have already begun a leadership transition. His deputy, Naim Qassem, has taken over. And it's likely that Hashem Saifuddin, who is his cousin and a major cleric in his own right, will be the permanent leader. My point is that even though Hezbollah has lost political leaders and commandos, this is not a small cult where you lop off the head of the charismatic master and the cult collapses, because Hezbollah is on the one hand a fighting force with 40,000 battle-hardened troops, right, active in reserve. It is a political party with something like, along with its allies, 60 seats in a 121-member Lebanese parliament. It is a social service agency, and it is a grassroots movement. It's not beloved by all Lebanese, but certainly within the Shia community, it has deep roots. So the idea that you're going to extirpate, to remove from the scene, a movement like this, it seems to me fantastical.
Now, you also mentioned in that previous article that the 1982 invasion resulted in an 18-year-long occupation, but then helped create Hezbollah. I wonder if you can talk about the possibilities of anything like that happening too. Is that one of the concerns?
Absolutely. I mean, the worry is not so much that there will be another Hezbollah-like movement that arises, although that's not beyond the realm of possibility. It is what the lessons of the previous invasions have taught the IDF, that is the Israel Defense Forces, and how they think they can avoid that predicament again. Now, they may think that this time, because they've dealt some serious body blows and headshots, if you will, to Hezbollah, that they can do it. And yes, they can, but remember that once you enter the home ground of Hezbollah and face its troops, they are not going to sit still. They're going to fight back. And the question is, what is the price that will be paid? And what reason is there to believe that this particular ground invasion, now the Israelis say it's going to be a minor one. I don't know what a minor one will achieve actually, but let's assume it scales up to a bigger one because Hezbollah fights back. What is the goal precisely? When I saw Hagari speak, he said, we want to prevent another October 7th. I have a hard time believing another October 7th is going to come from Israel's north. If that's not the goal, what precisely is the goal? The problem in Gaza, Danny, and in Hezbollah is that Israel has an enormous amount of firepower but to me, no discernible strategy. And this is just not my thinking. There is a very famous columnist in Israel who works for the paper Yediot Aharonot, and he said the other day that there is technology, but is there a strategy? By that he meant Israel has a high-tech military, it has a lot of oomph, but what is the underlying strategy? And my answer to that question is just like he seems not to see it, I don't see it.
Raj, I got to say that I see at least some similarities between Russia's initial invasion into Ukraine in 2022, where I think they had a plan A to roll in somewhere around 150 or so thousand troops into various points in Ukraine, thinking that they're going to scare Zelensky into leaving and submitting and leave. And then they would just yay, celebrate the victory. But when they fought back, Russia didn't have a plan B, and they weren't equipped to fight a long war. And I wonder if something similar could happen to that to the Israelis, because they seem to think that just by having this big show of force and all these explosions, that Hezbollah somehow just going to quit and roll back, or it's going to be easy to push them back to the Litani River. But if that doesn't prove to be the case, I don't know that Israel has the capacity to wage a long, bloody war right now.
Yeah, so let's look at what they have done and what they're about to do. What they've done is to wage a ferocious air campaign that has killed Nasrallah, and as I said, about 20 Hezbollah senior commanders and counting, as well as maybe other political leaders. So they have not just decapitated Hezbollah, they've taken aim at its torso and its limbs. Okay, they did that. Now, they were able to do that because, as I mentioned in the New Statesman piece, for about 2 decades, more or less, or certainly a decade, Amman, the military intelligence wing of Israel, has been working to try to hack the cell phones, the mobile phones of Hezbollah's senior officials, political and military, and put itself in a position where they could discern its whereabouts. That is why the decapitation strike and the strike against major commanders and political leaders succeeded. Okay, so they did that. They've also shown that they have enormous intelligence capability, enormous air power. But a ground invasion, as you well know, because you've been involved in these operations, is a completely different kettle of fish, especially in a very dense urban environment, when you're entering the home turf of the country that you hope to bring to submission by invading it. If not the country, then Hezbollah.
Yeah, so and that is one of my big concerns, for Israel, is that they may have underestimated the difficulty with this part of it, because they have had such a power imbalance over everybody else they fought so far in the ways that they've chose to fight it, to include Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But this is not the Gaza Strip, and this is a very, very different situation here. I want to move on real quick to something else, because I mentioned at the top of the show that I have maybe a little more than just some worry that we could end up getting sucked into a war against Iran. And I want to show you a little bit of the reasons why. So here I want to go back to the United Nations General Assembly speech by Netanyahu, where he was talking specifically about Iran. Watch this.
Iran's aggression, if it's not checked, will endanger every single country in the Middle East and many, many countries in the rest of the world, because Iran seeks to impose its radicalism well beyond the Middle East. That's why it funds terror networks on 5 continents. That's why it builds ballistic missiles for nuclear warheads to threaten the entire world. For too long, the world has appeased Iran. It turns a blind eye to its internal repression. It turns a blind eye to its external aggression. Well, that appeasement must end, and that appeasement must end now.
It worries me that he says that appeasement must end now. In the subsequent speech that he's made after that, actually, he again emphasized when he was talking to the people of Iran, where he said, "I have a message for you." He added that basically your time of trouble is coming to an end soon, where the leadership, making it sound like he has a plan to go there, not just that if they attack me, but that he has a plan to go after them. How do you parse what he said during that speech?
This is another example, as the previous clip by Hagari that you played, of Israel saying there is an adversary, in this case, Iran, that Netanyahu is talking about, implying that Israel has phenomenal firepower, which it does, and Iran's behavior must stop. So this begs two questions. How exactly are you going to make it stop? How much firepower are you going to deploy? Are you going to deploy it from the air, or are you going to deploy it from the ground or from the sea? And once you do that, assuming that the regime teeters and totters and collapses, and we're a long way from that, what is then the plan? So that's one thing. The other thing, he is partly speaking to the people of Iran and assuring them that better days are coming. Now, I don't think the Islamic Republic is beloved by all of its people by any means, but once you start a major war with a country, and we know this from our own experience, there's a rally around the flag effect. And even if you succeed in decapitating the government, which is what the Russian objective was early in the war in 2022, the question is, what will you inherit and what will be the follow-on effects, and are you in a position to control this? Now, we are trying to say that Iran is the problem. We have two carriers there, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. We've doubled the number
on the way.
Yeah, we've doubled the number of strike aircraft in the last 2 weeks. But the question is, what is this going to do? Is it going to communicate to the Iranians, okay, we are in a really tough spot. Our major regional allies are taking it on the chin. We have to do something, but the Americans are here. They have significant firepower, so do the Israelis. So we just have to suck it in and do nothing. Or is it going to have that effect, but also encourage Bibi Netanyahu to say, I've got the Americans on my side. It's an election year. I can be sure that I'll get more support. I'm going to use this opportunity to take out Iran. Iran's belief, and I said this in my most recent New Statesman piece, has always been that the tandem of the far right in Israel, including Netanyahu, of course, and super anti-Iran hawks in the United States have the belief that the main problem is not Hamas or Hezbollah for Israel, it is Iran. And until that problem is taken care of by a day of reckoning, Israel will not be secure.
Okay, and to that end, that is a perfect segue here. As you've been seeing, Gary's been throwing up headlines from literally all over Israel and the United States, major headlines. So lots of people are warning that, hey, there's like an imminent threat. They keep seeing that word right there. Well, I guess about 3 or 4 months ago, we had a clip from Jack Keane on here where he was saying, we should go after, to your point there, we should go after Iran because they're the real issue here. That's really what's going on. And he said, hey, we don't want a war. We're not talking about an open war. We're just talking about using a bunch of missiles to send a message. That's what he said back then. Now, I'm going to play a piece that was he was yesterday on Fox News, but I backed up the clip a little bit to start because I want you to see something that to me was just staggering and stunning in what it came from a guy named Eli Lake. They read some of his article on there and then watch Keene's response to that.
Eli Lake says this in the Free Press, that there are now strategic opportunities to go after Iran's nuclear program. If Harris and Biden were wise, they would shelve their strategy of endless ceasefire talks and instead embrace Israel's escalation, because the best way to end a regional war is to win it.
Where the Biden administration is, I think, they just want it to stop. That is simply where they are. And I think that is quite appalling, because they should be on Israel's side to crush Hezbollah, to crush Hamas, to crush the Houthis, and do that with our assistance as much as possible, to set Iran back for years to come and remove them as the dominant aggressive force in the region.
Yeah, well, who's the dominant aggressive force in the region? Let me come back to that in a minute. But Raj, let me just unpack for anybody who may have missed that. Eli Lake is saying, let's choose to go to war against Iran because we have this great opportunity, kind of like you just said a second ago. And then you see that piled on top of by Keene that said, yeah, the best way, or Lake said the best way to win a regional war, which we're not in, is to win it. And then Keene said the big problem with the current administration is they don't want a war. They just want it to be over. What's wrong with that? And he says they should do more. When you hear those kinds of things, what runs through your mind?
Well, Danny, you're a former military officer with a lot of experience, been in combat. There's an old saying that before you take the first step, think of the second and the third step. So the question to be asked is, if the United States were to join a war with Iran, first, what American interests would be served by that? And have we gamed out the possibilities that Iran may behave in a way not as we expect through submission, but through various forms of escalation? Or even if we succeed and decapitate the government, there will be chaos in a very large country, the side effects of which, as in Iraq 2003, were substantial. Now, the person on the clip that you just played mentioned the danger of Iran's nuclear program. You remember that we had an agreement with Iran, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Agreement, which may not have been perfect, no arms control agreement is, but essentially Iran agreed for a period of 20 years to cease uranium enrichment and other steps needed to develop a nuclear program and to allow highly intrusive inspections. But of course, when Trump came to power, he removed that. So we had a solution that was a non-military solution. It might not have been a perfect solution, but it beats the heck out of trying to deal with it, that is the nuclear program, through a full-on war.
It does, and it's just mind-boggling to me that, number one, that violates our Constitution. It violates the 1973 War Powers Act to think that the administration can, and it does have the ability, it can just give these orders. I mean, we're already positioning our forces in a position to where they may have to respond to something that happens to Israel, even though that's not what our law and Constitution provides for the armed forces to do. They're to defend our interests and our security, not Israel's, because they happen to have spawned an attack from Iran. But that be that as it may, the one other thing, and I'm sorry, I'm running a little low on time here, but I don't want to miss this other part here. Matt Miller yesterday was asked a couple of questions about the IDF operation, and he says, well, you know, we're still trying to get a ceasefire. Even though all this stuff has happened, he was asked by a reporter, and he said, yeah, we're still trying to get a ceasefire, which seems kind of odd that you're still trying to get a ceasefire. Well, now Israel is attacking. They're obviously not interested. But then in a separate interview with Trey Yingst, also yesterday on Fox, he was asked about what was going on. He was on the ground there while all this stuff's happened, all this ground incursions going on. And in terms of the U.S. seeking a negotiated settlement, listen to what I think he inadvertently admits here. Watch.
This is a significant development, and it is what the Americans fear, possibly the first step toward a broader regional conflict.
True or false? They did not even inform the U.S. that they were going to take out Nasrallah with 80 tons of bombs until the planes were in the air.
Yeah, we can confirm that, and it's pretty remarkable, and it gives you a sense of the fact that there is quite a bit of trust between the Israelis and the Americans, but also a little bit of distrust. There's real concern that the calls for a ceasefire from President Biden and other top American officials are so real that they could actually get in the way of Israeli operations. And so that's part of the reason that the Israelis are very careful about what and when they share information.
Okay, wait. American calls for a ceasefire could get in the way of Israel's combat operations. Everything we've been saying, Raj, for months and months is we want a ceasefire in Hamas, in Gaza. We want a ceasefire now then in Lebanon, and we want a two-state solution. And every time we say any of that stuff, it's rejected categorically out of hand. And now then, we have actually provided ammunition and weapons in the form of air power in the region to help Israel go even further. So are we actually trying to get a ceasefire, or is that all for show?
Well, we can say we want a ceasefire, but as you know, the 21-day ceasefire was rejected by Bibi Netanyahu. He has also said there will never be a Palestinian state. He won't accept it. Two of his coalition partners in the far right, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who want to keep the pot boiling, have essentially said, one of them said, Israel should control all of the area between the river and the sea, which here has been interpreted in the United States as an anti-Semitic comment. I will remind you that river to the sea has been used by the Israeli far right time and again. It is in the legal founding document. It is in Yair Netanyahu's Twitter bio section. That is the prime minister's son. So there has been no ceasefire in Gaza. In the West Bank, settlements are increasing at a rate that we've not seen before. Violence against the Palestinians, the theft of livestock is increasing to the point, Danny, where Hamas, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and Islamic Jihad have a stronger position in the West Bank than they did before. So there's no attempt to deal with one of the fundamental issues, right? And that is the occupation and the stifling blockade of Gaza. And I will say this, I am not arguing that Israel had no right to respond to the October 7th attack, which involved crimes and all manner of barbarities. The question really is the scale of the attack. 42,000 people killed, many more likely because they are under the rubble. And the debris alone, 40 million tons, it's estimated that it may take as many as $700 million to clear it. The place has been completely wrecked. So when the gun cease firing, what kind of life are Gazans going to go to? And even if Israel defeats Hamas, there will be thousands upon thousands of angry young men that will join some future resistance movement. So the question has to be asked, what's been achieved here? So neither in Gaza, nor on the northern flank, nor the West Bank have the political solution that we say we are aiming for come about. Instead, what we've said is, you act as you want to act. We've got your back. And Bibi Netanyahu, who is arguably the most Americanized of Israel's prime ministers, knows the United States very well, understands that in an election year in particular, no American president is going to put any daylight between himself and the Israelis, nor is Kamala Harris, and of course, nor will Donald Trump. So he has no restraints operating on him.
Yeah, that's been the one area where both candidates have been beating each other up to find out who's the most supportive of Israel. In the last minute I have here, where do you see this going? And that means both with the Hezbollah in the southern Lebanon and in the potential for an Iranian war. What's your handicap for whether we're going to have a conflict with Iran?
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question, but I kind of knew you would. My best sense is that the Iranians will try to be restrained because I think they understand what the downsides are for them. There will be some kind of retaliation. I think that if they fired Israel, the United States combined with Israel's air defenses will probably take all those down. That's what happened in, I think, 2022 when they tried it. But the question is not that. What happens if there is a significant escalation on the U.S. side? Iran responds and the US responds, and now we have a three-party war. Where does that go? And that is a $64 million question. If I told you that I had a clear idea where that could head, we don't know. It's an abyss.
Yeah.
The question is, are we prepared to step into it without asking ourselves, have we gamed out what the various possibilities are? Or are we just going to say we stand for a peaceful solution and we have Israel's back? That's not a strategy.
No, if anything, it's a strategy for more conflict. And yeah, I'm with you. I've made a number of assessments and projections over the course of the last several years, even going back to the Russia-Ukraine or even this one here, with some moderate confidence. But I got none here if something happens, because there is such a diversity of possibilities. But the one thing is that they're virtually all bad, and we'll continue to monitor this. And this is a very dynamic situation that's going on. Really appreciate you coming on today, Raj. This has been a fabulous show.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And we appreciate you guys coming with us. Listen, I mean, you saw some of these headlines that Gary continued to show up. Even since we've been on the air, this thing continues to evolve, and you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to keep you on top of this. So we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.